Welcome to Empower and Evolve, and I'm your host, Dunstan, and thanks for coming into today's episode. Now, this podcast is designed for those looking to break free from stagnation and enhance their well-being through actionable insights and inspiring stories. So you'd never miss an episode, hit that follow button and follow us through our social media accounts. Now, if you find value in our discussions, consider sharing this podcast with friends who you think might benefit listening today. Now let's get started on this journey of empowerment and transformation. Hi, Dun here, and thanks for coming back to Empower and Evolve. Now, for today, we're going to be talking about something everyone has been encountering. I mean, pretty much day in, day out. I wouldn't say everyone, I'd say a good majority. And it stemmed off from a conversation I had with my daughter a few weeks ago, because I was asking her how was school today, and she was telling me, "Dad, I am so stressed." And imagine this is coming from someone who's like 13 years old. And I was like, stressed at 13 with technology now and a lot of things that make life easier. She would tell me she was stressed. So I was starting to ask a lot of questions. I mean, trying to understand why. And what she said was, I have so many assignments today that I don't have time to watch my favorite anime. So I was like, okay. And how often does this happen? Right? So I mean, there were a lot of questions around it, and when I think about how kids nowadays can tell us adults that life can be stressful, our natural reaction is, you should have imagined how our life was years ago when you were still kids, or imagine the life your grandparents had back during the war we're in. That was stressful, right? But I mean, we cannot invalidate what a person can feel, right? What we can only do is support. And thinking about that conversation, we'd like to talk about more about stress and how we can manage stress, how we can have a little bit more balance to it, because we can't stop life throwing us curveballs, right? And the unplanned. So we'll talk more about, understanding what stress is in a wider audience, in a wider sense of things, and we'll talk a little bit more about actions that we can do to cope with it. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Right. So, first question is, what is stress? Right. It's a physiological and a psychological disalignment, right? Whether you put yourself not in a relaxed state. So, a good example, and maybe this is just to exaggerate the physiological aspect of stress, is, imagine an elephant sitting on top of your head. I mean, it's stressful because the elephant we know is heavy. Versus, let's say you wear a cap. Right? A cap, pretty much, or a hat, is very light compared to an elephant. You won't feel stressed wearing a hat versus having an elephant on top of your head. Or lifting something heavy versus lifting something light. It puts pressure, right? The psychological aspect of stress, on the other hand, is this elephant in our mind. We already know, thinking about that statement alone, and without you actually having an elephant sit on your head, is stressful enough that, hey, how am I going to manage this? This elephant's really big. Or to make it a more realistic approach, you have, let's say, 100 things to do today, and you only have 24 hours. You're stressed already thinking about the 100 things which you haven't even started doing any of them, right? So, for some, the 100 things could be easy. The 100 things could be difficult for another person. The 100 things could be impossible for a third person, right? Stress now, when you think about what I've mentioned earlier, it's how we perceive it, how it puts our mind or our body in an uncomfortable state because we need to exert effort. And depending on how much effort you're putting out there, is correlated to the stress impact it gives you. I hope it does make sense, right? But as human beings, and we talk about, the daily stress that we get, there is a term we call acute stress, which is short-term stress, and chronic stress, which is long-term. So, for example, you have a sprain. The immediate pain that you get of having the sprain is acute. But if, let's say, the sprain wasn't treated properly and it gets dislocated and you don't walk properly for maybe 1 to 2 weeks, it now becomes chronic because it has a long-term period. I mean, a sprain may not be long enough, but maybe a dislocated hip could take weeks for it to heal, a broken finger, a broken bone, right? Or on a relationship, right? It could be a lot of things that could be in a short term or a long term. Whether you had an argument that later the day you guys already have made up and you're already okay, or maybe, it's really a dent in a relationship that really affects how you work things in the long run, right? But remember, and I think this is the more sensible way of looking at it. In our age, decades ago, we use the term stress if it's long term. As adults, especially if you're already in the workspace or in the working environment, it sometimes we would tell our peers, "Hey, I feel I'm burned out." Because it's chronic, it's overly long, and it's already taking a toll in your mind and your body, right? Your psychological and physiological, right? Now, when you think about stress now, I'd like you to think about what triggers you to feel stressed. Some people who are perfectionists don't like it if things are changing rapidly. More so even changing once a plan has been set, right? Others they feel stressed by a 2-hour traffic drive to the office of just maybe 10, 15 kilometers away, right? And it's just the morning traffic, right? For some, it could just be someone saying a comment that you didn't really like because you were biased with the person and you hated the person, and whatever that person says, whether it's not really impactful, because you have that notion about this person, it becomes stressful for you, right? Good examples would be your work deadline or maybe financial concerns, right? These are all stressful factors. And some may be acute. Some can be chronic. Some acute stress, if done repeatedly for a long period of time, becomes chronic stress. I've been in the workspace for over 20 years. And before the pandemic, when there was no work from home option, everyone was going through the daily traffic, whether you're working the night shift, whether you're working in the normal morning daytime schedule, there is normal traffic, right? Some people have learned to live with it. Some people feel stressed right off the bat. Hey, it's traffic. Uh, I'm stressed because the traffic was heavy, right? The volume of the cars in the road is heavy. Some may prolong the feeling and make it chronic to the point that, especially during the pandemic, when the option was everyone was forced to work from home for a good 2 years straight, nobody wanted. A lot of people wasn't really comfortable to go back to the normal grind of going to the traffic, the volume, the car traffic, right? Because they feel now it's it's stressful. It was stressful back then, right? It was a combination of an acute stress if you're just thinking about it on the day itself, but like in my case, I've enjoyed enjoyed the term, morning traffic or evening traffic for what, 2 decades. And when I had the chance to enjoy working from home, just like most people who is in the workforce now, they prefer to have the option to get a job that allows them to work from home, right? Because it was already a chronic, stressful event for them. Now, why am I talking about traffic and talking about acute stress and chronic stress? There is a balance when you think about it, right? How are you able, or how are we able to take on that 2 decades of morning or evening traffic every single day? Have you ever wondered how come nobody had thought of, or even thought of the option of a work from home for the past 2 decades, even if internet was already available, even if the telephone, the mobile technology has been here for almost 3 decades already, right? Zoom meeting apps or like communicator apps has been here for what, 2 decades, close to 2 decades, and yet it was only the pandemic that forced everyone to really take on that avenue. I mean, there were a lot of stress factors revolving the pandemic. I mean, traffic is one way of, like, it makes it easier, but of course, there's another huge list of stressful factors, both financially, the acute and the chronic stress of 2 years being locked down, um, taught us, right? So, understanding that balance of how we can manage your stress is important, because if in the past 2 decades, and I'm just using the example of morning traffic here, you were already stressed in the traffic because you were stuck in traffic for 2 hours, and yet come to the office or when you reach school, you can smile, you can be productive, right? How do you find that balance? So, using that example, I mean, I have a few actionable items that you can do, to manage the stress. Um, and using that example earlier of the traffic, you have to practice mindfulness. I mean, you'd hear me say that day in, day out, pretty much every single episode here at Empower and Evolve, right? We talk about that mindfulness, that mindset of being in the now. Because let's say you're stuck in traffic, you can now enjoy maybe looking at the car beside you. That, hey, this cars look nice. Or maybe even start tinkering inside the car that you're in. Start observing the people in front of you in the jeep, or in the public jeep, or in the bus, right? You can now have the time now to think about how you're gonna plan for the day, instead of thinking about how stressful or how bad the volume of the traffic is, that the cars are not moving and stuff, right? Because you're being mindful about that extra time, you realize that there's an extra time that you can do other things. then it becomes less stressful, right? It's just that mindset. Now, another thing, of course, is being able to eat right, have the right physical activity. The pandemic, I'm also a victim of the pandemic where I gained weight. Trust me, I've gained weight. Not because I didn't eat right, but actually I ate better. I was able to veer away from junk food and really enjoy home cooked meals. Even I was cooking my own home cooked meal, right? But what I lost here is because of where I live at. Unlike before, that I would maybe walk a good 5-6 kilometers on the average in a day. Now I can only do maybe 2 or 3 kilometers in a day, and that's bad. I'll be honest, that's bad, right? I'm working on that, trying to make sure that I have the time and put in the time, manage my calendar to put in the additional steps to get that physical activity in place. But if you have the capacity to do physical activities, like, I mean, for those who have gym memberships, go to the gym. If you have a weekend, if you're a weekend warrior that plays sports every weekend, um, try to capitalize that, right? It builds your relationships, and working out produces that sweat, increases that blood flow in your heart. So overall, there's something good that comes out of it, right? Uh, muscle wise, you won't have muscle degeneration. You get more fluids, so your endocrine system, and sorry for doctors here, tell me if I'm right or wrong. It helps you flush the toxins out of your body, right? Because you're working out, you're sweating, and that physical activity actually puts you in a good mindset. There was a study before, anecdotal. There was a study before that people who are stressed, they used a group of people who are in a corporate space and introduced them to jogging or running, right? It helped them to focus more. It helped them to reduce that level of, that lack of focus, just by running maybe 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers a day. Because the mind is attuned and being put in the conscious space of the now. You're on the road running or jogging, you have to be mindful of your surroundings, right? If there's an incoming car, and a lot of people try to put closed ear plugs, right? So they have to be extra mindful of their environment. They have to be conscious that they might trip over something, or they might slip, or they might, accidentally sprain themselves. So they have to be mindful of where they're actually stepping, right? So see, that activity alone puts you in a lot of focus activities that helps you practice mindfulness and being in the now. Now, on the other aspect of, activity actions that you can do when you're trying to manage stress, of course, it involves time and task management. Knowing what you can only do in 24 hours. Understanding what you can do now versus you doing it later, or the day after, or the day after next, right? Understanding that I can only put 15 minutes now versus I can put an hour or 2 hours on a task, right? Funny enough, my editor would always tell me, "Done. Episode is only maximum 15 minutes." It's hard because I have so many things I wanted to share. So I have to be really mindful to try to cut it down, make it really direct and simple and easy to digest. And again, forgive me, it's an ongoing process. I love to talk. I have so many things I want to share. And I know some guys might be feel like, yeah, it's talking too much. But I hope that you guys find a lot of things in our episodes, or in my episodes here at Empower and Evolve. Now, that boundary is something that you have to be able to put. Not only in my example, but also with your work boundary. You know, funny enough, when you think about it, the traffic or the rush hour or the 2 hour, 3 hour drive going to and from the office has actually indirectly put boundaries. Why? Imagine you're working from 8 to 5. So you have to leave the house by 5 if it's a 3 hour traffic. Or leave before 5. So mean to say you'd be up at 4 in the morning. Which was my case when I was in high school. I have to wake up at 4 because I have to leave by 5 to be at school at 7. So wake up at 4, asking myself what time do I need to sleep puts a boundary of I can only study up to do or do something up to this time. And going home, because I know that when I leave the school by 4 in the afternoon, I will be in the thick of things in the traffic. So I'll get home maybe 7, 7:30, 8 in the evening. So as much as possible, if I can avoid having after school activities and just go to the bus stop and get my ride home or get a ride home, I would do so. Leave the school at 4 exactly, be at the bus station at 4:15, 4:20. Wait for a bus and hopefully get a ride before 5 so I can be home by 7. Right? Indirectly, because we know of we are mindful of the circumstances around us, how much time it's gonna take, what are the factors involved. We've placed our boundaries already, right? And like in that case, I get home by 8, have dinner, change clothes, have dinner. 9 to maybe around 11, I study. 11:30, lights out, sleep, wake up at 4. So I only have maybe 4.5 hours of sleep every day. But in the morning, since I leave the house by 5, and luckily enough, I don't need to take the public transport in the morning, I can sleep in the car. So that's maybe an extra 1.5 hours of sleep. So total of about 6 hours, 4.5 and an hour and a half, right? That's how you maximize the time that you have. That's how I maximize the time that I have going to and from school. And lastly, try to incorporate relaxation techniques. Within the day, and this is to manage acute stress and not only chronic stress, right? Acute stress like breathing techniques, box breathing, especially if you feel stressed, you feel tensed. You sit down, feet flat, hands on your lap, close your eyes, inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth in a count of 8s, or you can do 4s. 4 counts of inhale, deep inhale, like expand your lungs. Hold your breath for 4 seconds and then slowly exhale for 4 seconds. Do that 10 times, 20 times, 30 times until you feel relaxed. And just focus on that breathing. Feel how your lungs expand, feel how the air comes through your nose and how it slowly exhales in your mouth. That's just focusing on those 3. Inhale, hold, and exhale. And then do that 10 times, 20 times. Puts you in that mindful space of where you are now. You could also do hobbies, right? If you like to do reading. Like in my case, my relaxation technique during work hours is on my lunch. I eat lunch 10 minutes, and for the other 50 minutes, I take 30 minutes out of it for a nap. So just to recharge my brain, right? I mean, there are so many things you can do. You can do. Some people during the pandemic, they've bought walking treadmills as part of their relaxation, so that in midday they relax by walking, maybe 3 minutes, 5 minutes of just light, easy walking can also relax. Or maybe have your cup of coffee, just like what I have, or maybe their perfect cup of tea. So, that's it for today's episode. I hope you're able to pick up a few things on how to manage stress in our daily lives. And I hope that today's episode has helped you on your journey to become a better version of you. And with that, always remember, here at Empower and Evolve, our goal is to help you become a better version of you. So stay safe, my friend. Take care. Catch you next week. Bye for now. Hey buddy, thank you for joining us on this transformative journey of empowerment and growth. Now remember, it's not just about evolving. It's about embracing that incredible power within you to become the best version of yourself. Keep striving for greatness, because together, we can create a world where empowerment knows no bounds. And if you find value in today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and share this podcast with someone who could use that little inspiration. Until next time, stay empowered, stay inspired, and keep shining brightly on your path to evolution. With Empower and Evolve, you have the tools to unleash your potential and rewrite your story. Let's continue to evolve together.